Uh, so I welcome all of you with a warm New Year wishes. Uh, we had a short break in our IST series, and we are resuming with two talks in this session. The talks will be by Ajit and Venkatesh. The first talk will be given by Ajit, and he will talk to us on Parton paradigms for quantum Hall effects. Over to you, Ajit.
Okay, thanks. So let me start off also by wishing you all a very happy, healthy, and prosperous new year. And let me also thank the IST for giving me an opportunity to present our work. So I'm going to talk about the Parton paradigm for the quantum Hall effect. This is work done in collaboration with Sutirtha Mukherjee and Kwan Park, who are at the Korea Institute for Advanced Study, Janendra Jain, who's at the Pennsylvania State University, Mehsam Barkeshli, who's at the Joint Quantum Institute in Maryland, and Mark Turner, who was my postdoc advisor in Copenhagen. So a part of this work was started while I was a postdoc in the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen. And there I was supported by the Willem Foundation and Mark's ERC grant. And I'd like to give a special mention to the coding package TIGHAM, which we've used extensively for our calculations. Okay, so generically I'm interested in emergent phenomena in quantum many-body systems, so interacting quantum systems. And a characteristic feature of these systems is that they have this phenomena called fractionalizations. So degrees of freedom which are not part of the original problem actually suddenly emerge when you tune the system into certain parameter regimes. So a classic example of this is unpaired Majorana fermions which emerge at the ends of a one-dimensional nanowire. So let's say you take a one-dimensional system of electrons which are hopping on the system, and then you have some superconducting pairing term which allows nearest neighbors to pair up. Then you can set parameters in such a way that you have two unpaired Majoranas at the ends of the wire. So every electron, which is a fermion, can be thought of as made up of two Majorana fermions. And you can choose parameters in such a way that you end up actually with two Majoranas at the end. So if you look at it from afar, originally there were no Majoranas to begin with. So you just had electrons hopping on a lattice with some superconducting term. And suddenly these Majoranas emerge. So a similar example is that of the AKLT spin chain. So you can actually take the same plot, just look at the same figure and look at each of these blue bubbles and think of them as spin 1 particles. And again, if you tune the Hamiltonian in a particular way, you can actually end up with two spin halves at the ends of the wire. So initially there are no spin halves at all in the problem, but suddenly spin halves emerge when you tune the Hamiltonian into a particular regime. And actually the prototypical example of this model of fractionalization is the fractional quantum Hall effect, about which I'm going to talk in detail. And here actually certain more things happen. So you get particles which carry a charge, which is a fraction of that of the electron. And not just charge, you also get fractional statistics. So as most of us know, in 3 dimensions, in our usual world, we actually have only particles of 2 kinds, so-called bosons and fermions. So bosons are characterized by this fact that if you exchange 2 bosons, you don't get any phase in the wave functions. Whereas in fermions, when you exchange 2 fermions, you get a minus sign in the wave function. So this is all that is allowed in 3 dimensions. However, if you go to 2 dimensions, then you get a set of particles called anions which can emerge. And when you exchange 2 of these anions, you can get an arbitrary phase. So this anion name comes from this fact that you can get any phase. So e to the I theta. So these set of anions are so-called abelian anions. But there's also a novel type of anions called non-abelian anions, in which when you exchange 2 of these non-abelian anions, you can actually change the state of the system itself. And the fractional quantum Hall effect is actually a promising platform which can actually host these non-abelian anions. So why is it that we are interested in these non-abelian anions? And the answer turns out that they are one of the most promising candidates to carry out quantum computation with. So in 2 plus 1 dimensions, so when I say 2 plus 1 dimensions, I mean 2 space dimensions and 1 time, which is going in the z direction. So you can think of anions as carrying some sort of memory. So this many-body state of anions actually keeps track of how the anions went around each other. So these whirl lines that I've shown, they actually show the trajectory of the anions in this 2 plus 1D world. And this actually allows you to map the problem of movement of anions in Hilbert space to the mathematical problem of knots and braids. And as our math colleagues would tell us, the knots and braids are sufficiently complicated, in the sense sufficiently powerful to actually carry out quantum computation. And a very nice feature of doing computation this way is that it's somewhat robust to disorder. So let me give you a simple example. So let's say I have 2 lines here which go straight with each other, the so-called unknot, and that you can consider as the qubit being in the 0 state, let's say the off state. And then let's say you have a knot, let's say a figure of 8. And that you can consider as the qubit being in one state. And now what I can do is I can jiggle the word line a little bit. Like let's say I create some noise here. That actually does not change this fact that there is a knot somewhere down the line. So if you store this information only in the fact that there was a knot or there wasn't a knot, so in some sense topological, then it is quite robust to disorder. So in that sense, this kind of computation is fault tolerant. And this actually brings us back to fractional quantum Hall effect, because one of the leading candidates to host these non-abelian anyons are fractional quantum Hall phases. So with that background in place, let me go to the plan of the talk. So I'm going to start off by describing so-called integer quantum Hall effect, and then go to the fractional quantum Hall effect. And there I'm going to go in two steps. So I'm going to first describe quantum Hall effect that occurs in the lowest Landau level, which is described by the so-called composite fermion framework, and then come to our work, which is about quantum Hall effect in the second Landau level, which I'll show is well captured by the Parton framework. Okay, so what is the integer quantum Hall effect? So most of us would have studied Hall effect in our high school. So you take a two-dimensional system of electrons or holes or any kind of particles that you like. You run current one way and you measure voltage the opposite way. So you measure this ratio of Vxy, the Hall voltage, to the current, and that defines the resistance, the so-called Hall resistance. And what Klaus von Klitzing found in 1980 is that if you do this experiment in a two-dimensional system, then you find that the Hall resistance is exquisitely quantized to units of h over e square. And actually, this is not some approximate. So the Hall resistance is not approximately h over e square. It is exactly h over n e square. So this quantization, to the best of our knowledge, is accurate to 1 part in a billion. And from last year onwards, it actually has gone into the standard of resistance. And a very nice feature of this Hall resistance, the value is that it's independent of lots of things like sample quality, disorder, sample geometry, and even systems as far apart as like graphene and gallium arsenide give you the same level of quantization. Okay, so how do we go about understanding the integer quantum Hall effect? So this is actually a relatively easy problem to understand, because this just comes about from non-interacting physics. So if you take a single particle system, single particle set of, you get multiple electrons which are non-interacting, and you put them in zero magnetic field, then they form a state which is the so-called Fermi C. And electrons just fill up levels up to some Fermi energy. But the moment you turn on a magnetic field, then this Fermi C actually splits into highly degenerate bands called Landau levels. And this filling factor that will keep coming up, nu, is defined as the number of electrons divided by the number of states that are available. So when do you get the integer quantum Hall effect? You get an integer quantum Hall effect when some number of Landau levels are filled. And why do you get an IQHE state? It's because you get a gap to excitation. So when some number of levels are filled, then there is some finite gap to go to the next level. And this gap is given by h bar omega c, which is the so-called cyclotron frequency, and that is proportional to the magnetic field. So if you ramp up the magnetic field, this gap goes up. Okay, one can actually also understand, so you might say that if there's a gap, then this should be like an insulating state. But I just told you that you actually get current and you get a Hall resistance. So how is it that even though the system is actually an insulator in the bulk, you get transport along the edge? So this one can actually understand from just semi-classical physics. So as we all know, if you have an electron in a magnetic field, then it experiences a Lorentz force, which actually turns it around. So in the bulk of the system, these Lorentz orbits actually complete each other. So you get fully localized movement of electrons. But at the edge of the system, these orbits cannot complete each other because there is nothing outside, there is just vacuum. So the electron has to stay inside. So what it does is it does the skipping motion along the edge of the sample. And this is what conducts electricity along the, this is what conducts current along the edges of the sample. And this is also another way to see why the system is so robust to disorder and doesn't, is kind of insensitive to things like sample geometry and sample type. Because let's say if I just put a piece of dirt at the edge of the sample, then the direction of the electron orbit is simply fixed by the magnetic field. And once you have the field direction fixing the direction of the orbit, then it can only go in one direction. So if you just have some sort of disorder, then it will just go around the disorder. So that's why this quantization is extremely robust. Okay, one can actually also go ahead and solve the quantum mechanical problem fully. So I'm not going to do this. I'm going to just tell you what the results are. So if you solve the Schrodinger equation of a single particle in a magnetic field, you get these Landau levels. And as I said, these Landau levels, one can actually characterize by two quantum numbers, the so-called Landau level index, and then another quantum number called m, which characterizes which state within the Landau level you are in. So if you go ahead and do this problem, you will actually get wave functions, single particle wave functions, which are of the form z to the m times a Gaussian part times some associated Laguerre polynomial. So here z is just a way to parameterize the two-dimensional coordinate as a complex number. So Z is just x minus iy. And there is a characteristic length that shows up, the magnetic length, which is just square root of h power over u. Okay, so for the lowest Landau level, actually something very nice happens. So as we know, the associated Laguerre polynomial there just turns out to be 1. So I'm going to drop the Gaussian part because that's not going to play any role throughout this talk. So there the wave functions are simply some z to the n. So they're just some polynomials in z. And let's say if I want to write down what is the wave function of the lowest full Landau level, then what I need to do is to take the first electron, put it in m equal to 0, then take the second electron, put it in m equal to 1, third electron in m equal to 2, and so on. But then at the end of the day, I have to antisymmetrize this wave function because electrons are fermions. So that one can do by just looking at this determinant of zi to the power j minus 1, where I and j both run from 1 to n. And this turns out to be the famous van der Monde determinant, and its value is just given by product of I less than j zi minus gj, so-called the van der Monde. So this is a determinant of the van der Monde matrix, so the so-called van der Monde determinant. And actually one can write this down without actually going through this process because we know that electrons are fermions, so every fermion has to see a 0 at every other fermion. And this is the only allowed wave function that you can write down. Every electron zi sees a 0 at every other zj. Okay, so very soon after Klitzing, Sui, Stormer, and Gossard went about doing the same experiment but going to much larger magnetic fields and improving the sample quality. And amazingly, they found that the Hall conductance was actually quantized in units of h over 1/3 e squared. The Hall resistance is quantized in units of h over 1/3 e squared. And Sui seems to have remarked that he had found quarks in a condensed matter system. But just the measurement of the energy scales will tell you that this is a milli-electron phenomenon, not a mega-electron one. So you don't really have quarks in this system. So what is actually going on? So the fractional quantum Hall effect actually has to arise from electron-electron interactions. So you can look at this ideal theorist limit where you send the magnetic field to infinity. So all the electrons reside completely in the lowest Landau level. Now if you just take them to be non-interacting, then this is a highly degenerate manifold. Right? So here is an example of filling factor 2/5. So I have 4 electrons in 10 orbitals, so that gives me filling factor 2/5. And if I don't take any interactions into account, then there are 10 choose 4 ways of getting the ground state. So all of them have the same kinetic energy. So the interactions is what picks out one unique state from this highly degenerate manifold. And the quantum mechanics of the problem is built in this fact that you're living entirely in the lowest Landau level. So once you project to the lowest Landau level, these coordinates x and y don't commute with each other. So how do we go about making any progress? We don't even know how to solve 3 particles interacting with each other. So how are we going to solve n particles? So the first progress in this direction was made by Laughlin, who essentially just guessed an answer. So he looked at this van der Monde form and said that electrons interact in the same form, but now with a higher power. So Laughlin proposed this wave function where you take the van der Monde and then raise it to some power m. So for fermions, this is completely valid as long as m is an odd integer, because then the fermion antisymmetry is maintained. And furthermore, he actually showed that if you have a state of this form, then that describes filling factor 1 over m. So this largest power of this polynomial actually fixes the filling factor. Furthermore, he actually went on to show that this is a fluid that carries fractionally charged particles, and they also obey fractional braid statistics. So if you move 2 around each other, then you get a phase which is like e to the I pi over m. But very soon there was a whole zoo of fractions that were discovered. So you had this Laughlin state at 1/3, but then people also saw 2/5, 3/7, 4/9, and so on. And unfortunately, you can't take the Laughlin state and simply put m as 5 over 2. Because as I said, this is a fermionic state, so only odd integers are allowed. If you put 5 over 2, then this is not a single valued wave function. So again, we are back to square one. So how do we go about understanding this 2/5, 3/7, and so on? And the first clue to that came from the fact that if I actually remove those numbers out from the plot, then it's very hard for you to tell me which among these are actually integer plateaus and which among these are actually fractional plateaus. So in some sense, this indicates that the fractional and the integer quantum Hall states are probably qualitatively similar. And indeed, it turns out to be the case. So the fractional quantum Hall effect can be described as the integer quantum Hall effect of certain emergent fermions, so-called composite fermions. A composite fermion, by definition, is a bound state of an electron and an even number of vortices. And vortices in many contexts are similar to flux quanta. So you're also welcome to think of the composite fermion as a bound state of an electron and an even number of flux quanta. So here I mapped out the path to go from the integer quantum Hall effect to the fractional quantum Hall effect. So you start with first electrons in a small magnetic field. Then to each electron, you bind 2 flux quanta. And then you slowly smear out these flux quanta to merge with the external magnetic field. And then you are back at the problem of interest, that is electrons at a much larger magnetic field. And in this process of smearing out the flux, you kind of hope and pray that the gap does not close. Because what you want is to be adiabatically connect, well, to be able to adiabatically connect this panel B with panel C. Now with this in place, you can actually run the tape backwards. So I start with electrons in a much larger magnetic field. And then from this external magnetic field, I capture two flux quanta and bind it to each of the electrons. So now these composite fermions themselves see a reduced magnetic field. So B star, the star quantities are all composite fermion quantities, is some B minus 2 times the flux quanta that I've captured. So this flux quanta is given by H over E. It's made up of some fundamental constants. This actually also allows you to relate the filling factor of the electron with the filling factor of composite fermion. So the filling factor of the electrons is some rho phi naught over B, whereas that of composite fermions is similar, with B now replaced with B star. And to a first approximation, you just assume that composite fermions don't interact with each other. And now you can again go back to electrons being non-interacting in a magnetic field. So what happens when electrons are non-interacting in a magnetic field? They form Landau levels. And we saw that whenever an integer number of Landau levels are filled, you get integer quantum Hall effect. Similarly, when composite fermions are in a small magnetic field, they also form their own Landau-like levels because I've assumed that they are non-interacting. And whenever an integer number of these Landau levels, these so-called lambda levels, are filled, then you get fractional quantum Hall effect. Okay, so let me just pictorially tell you what the states are. So when you have one fill lambda level of composite fermions, you get filling factor 1/3. You can go back here and look at this relation. So when nu is the filling factor of electrons, and nu star is the filling factor of composite fermions. Let's say if I bind to flux quanta, then P is actually 1. So nu equal to nu star over 2 nu star plus 1. So when nu star is 1, I get nu equal to 1/3. So similarly, when you have 2 fill lambda levels of composite fermions, you get 2/5. 3 fill lambda levels gives 3/7, and so on. So all the ground states of the fractional quantum Hall system map to the ground states of integer quantum Hall systems. Moreover, we can also write down excitations because we know how to write down excitations in the integer quantum Hall system. I mean, at the end of the day, the integer quantum Hall system is a non-interacting system which we understand completely. So now what we do is to just use this mapping. So if you want to put an extra particle in the fractional quantum Hall system, I just put it in the next available lambda level. And similarly, a missing particle hole in the system is just a missing composite fermion from a lambda level. And similarly, one can also create neutral excitations, which are just these pairs of particle hole pairs. So till now, everything that I said has been quite qualitative, but one can actually use this mapping to write down quantitative wave functions to describe these things. So these are the so-called Jan wave functions, and their construction goes exactly according to this mapping. So let me first start with an integer quantum Hall state, which I write as phi n, which is a slated determinant state. So we saw that phi 1, which is the state of 1 fill lambda level, is this Van der Waals. But now if you have 2 fill lambda levels or 3 fill lambda level, you just write the appropriate stated determinant state. And then to that, I do this vortex binding, which I do using this Laughlin-Jastrow factor. So I take Zi minus Zj to the power 2p and multiply it with this integer quantum Hall state. And this will do some vortex binding because whenever I take Zi around Zj, it will see some 2p flux quanta. And then because I want to work in this ideal limit where I send the magnetic field to infinity so that everything lives in the lowest Landau level, I have to just brute force project this wave function into the lowest Landau level. And an amazing thing about this wave function is that you usually write down these wave functions as some variational states. And these variational states carry some parameters that you optimize according to the problem. But here, the moment you fix the filling factor on the left-hand side, everything else on the right-hand side gets completely fixed. So these are kind of variational states with no adjustable parameters. And one might actually think that projection is a very difficult operation because usually when you have to do projection, you have to expand the state in the full Hilbert space and just retain the part that lives in the relevant Hilbert space. And that is actually complexity order factorial because the way you can arrange particles in some number of states goes as factorial. So that might look very hard, but actually there are some ways to write down approximate wave functions to characterize these systems of very large sizes. So you can actually approach thermodynamic limit quite accurately here. So maybe some of you already noticed that at the simplest filling fraction that one can think of, filling factor half, there is no quantum Hall effect. So why is it that at filling factor half we don't see any FQHE? So again, composite fermion theory actually explains why this is the case. Because at filling factor 1/2, this process of attaching vortices actually eats up the magnetic field completely. So this B star that you see actually turns out to be 0. And as I said, if you don't have any magnetic field, electrons form a Fermi C. So similarly, composite fermions in 0 magnetic field form their own Fermi C. And Fermi C is a gapless state, so you can't get any integer quantum Hall effect. One should just stop a little bit and think about it. So the Fermi C that we're used to in standard physics comes completely from kinetic energy. So you will states up to some kinetic energy. But this is a Fermi C that arises completely from interactions. Okay, so one can ask how accurate is the composite fermion theory. So here is just one example in which I take filling factor 3/7. And in these dashes, with these dashes, I show what are the exact energies of the Coulomb problem. So these dashes can just be obtained by brute force diagonalizing the Coulomb interaction. whereas these dots are composite fermion wave function energies. And essentially, the dots and dashes cannot be told apart. So here, for example, this first dot is actually this state, filling factor 37, where you fill 3 lambda levels. Then the next set of bands are actually these particle hole pairs, and so on. Actually, we can capture the whole set of bands. So the first band, so on, and so on. And the amazing thing is that if you look at every angular momentum sector here, then there are about 1 million states. So this dot actually has to capture precisely a combination of 1 million coefficients. And it does so without any variational parameters. This indeed turns out to be quite magical. So let me just summarize in the end in a humorous way what composite fermions are. And this is due to one part. So electrons interacting in a much larger magnetic field are actually extremely unhappy because their movement is restricted. They are holding on to each other very tightly. But the moment they separate out and hold onto 2 flux quanta from the external magnetic field, then they essentially behave as non-interacting and they're extremely happy. Okay, so this is all known for about 3 decades now. So what's all new in this field now? Okay, so for that one has to go a level higher, which in this context means a Landau level higher. So onwards to the second Landau level. So just like I showed you in the lowest Landau level, you got states along this sequence n over 2 n plus minus 1. Similarly, in the second Landau level, you get some set of fractional quantum Hall states. So all the states in the second Landau level are denoted in this form 2 plus something, because the lowest Landau level of spin up and spin down are completely filled. So that just gives you a factor of 2. So you can forget about this factor of 2 because throughout this work, I'm going to assume that that is completely inert. So you can just focus on the fraction. So let's see what all fractions do we get in the second Landau level. So we get a filling factor 1/3. That looks good. That looks like it is going along the lowest Landau level sequence. Then we get filling factor 2/5. So we have 1/3 and then 2/5. But we don't see any 3/7. We don't see any 4/9. We don't see any 5/11. But pop comes out 6/13. So if you look at the lowest Landau level sequence, we have the sequence n over 2 n plus 1, which goes as 1/3, 2/5, 3/7, 4/9, and so on. But here we see 1/3 and 2/5, but we don't see the rest. And somehow suddenly 6/13 comes up. Then more astoundingly, you get some even denominator states. So you get states of the form 2 plus a half. The very famous pattern goes by the name phi half. Then we also have another even denominator state, 2 plus 3. And if you look at the wave functions that I wrote down, they are of this form n over 2 p n plus minus 1. So that necessitates having an odd denominator. As long as p and n are integers, you can only construct odd denominator states. Actually, how do we go about describing these states? And it turns out one can actually describe these states in terms of so-called Parton states. So you can unify both the lowest and second Landau levels in terms of Parton states. So what is the idea of the Parton theory? So in the Parton theory, you take the electron and you break it up into fictitious objects called partons, and you place each of these partons into some integer quantum Hall states. And then you fuse the partons back together to recover the electron. So what this does is that this allows you to write down wave functions which are simply some products of integer quantum Hall states. And we understand integer quantum Hall states completely because they are non-interacting states, so we can easily write down their wave functions. And the idea is to construct correlated states by just taking a product of these. Now, because electrons are fermions, I need to necessarily have an odd number of partons. Because each of the integer quantum Hall states has a fermionic symmetry. So if I have an odd number of these, then I will maintain the fermionic symmetry. And using this equation, one can also relate the filling factor of the electrons with the filling factor of the partons. So the filling factor nu of the electrons is given by the filling factor of the partons in this fashion. Moreover, you can also relate the charge of the parton with the charge of the electron. Because each of the partons also live in the same magnetic field, and they also carry the same density as that of the electron, their charges have to be related to the charge of the electron, and they're related using this equation. So Q alpha is just minus E times, minus E is the charge of the electron, nu is the filling factor, and N alpha is the filling factor of the alpha parton. Okay, so the states that we saw already, the composite fermion states and the Laughlin state, they're also actually parton states. So the Laughlin state turns out to be a 1-1-1 parton states. So I showed you that the Laughlin state is some Zi minus Zj to power some n. And the phi 1 state is just a van der Waals, so it's just Zi minus Zj. So if you take a product of these, then you just get some power m of Zi minus Zj. And this is actually the simplest way to see that the Laughlin state carries E over 3 particles for 1/3 Laughlin state, because the wave function, each of the partons live with n alpha equal to 1, and nu is 1/3. So Q alpha is actually just 1 over 3. So in the Laughlin state, you have 3 partons, each of them carrying charge E over 3, which get together to form an electron of charge E. So here already you see fractionalization. So composite fermions are also parton states. In composite fermion states, you have one factor in phi n, and the rest of the factors 1-1-1. They do this flux attachment or vortex attachment. But actually, one can use this construction to write down states which go beyond the composite fermion theory. So one simple example is to take just 2 factors of phi2. So I take 2 factors of phi2, and by that I mean 2 full Landau levels, take a product of 2 of these, and then add another factor of phi1, because I need to have 3 factors to maintain fermionic symmetry. And it turns out this is actually a non-abelian state. So there's a theorem by Venn which says that if you have multiple factors of phi2 or phi3 and so on, then you get a non-abelian state. It turns out that this is actually not a good state for the phi half problem, but there have been some recent proposals to realize this in FQHE. So one nice thing about this Parton state is that if you look at the electronic charge, that's just E, right? But here with these 3, you actually get fraction charges, and you also get different ones. So you get 2 charges of U over 4 and 1 of U over 2. Okay, so with this, I'm actually ready to state the main result of our work. So this is like the take-home message. So we actually found out 2 Parton sequences. So they go as phi n star, phi 2 star, phi 1 cube. So by star, I just mean complex conjugating. Because you have the z's, you are allowed to complex conjugate that state. So this gives you a sequence of states at filling factor 2n over phi n minus 2. Then there is another sequence of state which goes as phi n star, phi 2 star, phi 2 star, phi 1 to the 4th. And this gives you a state at filling factor n over 3n minus 1. And the claim is that these capture all the states that we see in the second Landau level. So in that, we already saw that the composite fermion states capture the lowest Landau level, and these states capture the second Landau level. So put together, they capture all the states. So let me go over one of these sequences. So let's look at this 2n over phi n minus 2 sequence. So for n equal to 1, that gives us a standard state 2/3. For n equal to 2, that gives the state actually 1/2. So this is indeed a good description of the phi half state. And for n equal to 3, we actually get a state at 613. And this kind of explains why 613 is out of order. Because 613 is not the n equal to 6 member of the n over 2n plus 1 sequence. It is actually the n equal to 3 member of this 2n over phi n minus 2 sequence. That's why it appears so much higher up, and that's why 3, 7, 4, 9, 5, 11 don't show up, whereas 613 suddenly shows up. Similarly, this other sequence gives you n over 3n minus 1. And that captures states at filling factor 1/2, 2/5, and 3/8. And this 2/5 is a very interesting state. It is actually a non-abelian state that's capable of doing universal quantum computation. So for example, if you look at the excitation state, yeah.
We are running short of time, so maybe you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna just finish in a minute.
Yes.
Okay, so you can ask why these Parton states and not something else. So one thing is that we know from the lowest Landau level theory is that putting factors of phi 1 is good, because phi 1 is of this form Zi minus Zj. It keeps the electrons away from each other. And the Coulomb interaction is after all repulsive, so you like to keep electrons far away. And all we did to the composite fermion state is change another factor of 1 to be 2 or minus 2. So our Parton states are actually of this form. But at the end of the day, this comes down to energetics. It just turns out that for the second Landau level problem, the sequence of Parton states that we proposed are most likely. However, it's still an open problem. Given some interaction, which Parton state is likely to be stabilized is a hard problem to answer. Okay, so let me just end with a one-line take-home message. So almost all fractional quantum Hall states that we know of are simply given by some product of integer quantum Hall states. And maybe all interacting states that we know of can be constructed using this recipe. You just take some bunch of non-interacting states, take a product of these, put them together, and that's the way to construct interacting states. Okay, so let me thank you all for your attention, and I'll be happy to take questions.
Yeah, are there any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Ravindran.
I have a question.
A small question. This is
maybe. Okay.
Yeah, just a short question. These experiments are done at low temperature.
Yes.
So what is the experiments of this phenomenon?
Sorry?
How do the graphs change with temperature?
Usually what happens is that you need to go to temperatures which are below the gap of the system. Usually what happens in quantum Hall states is the gap is quite low. So
how much is the temperature?
Sorry, what happens with what?
No, how much is the temperature?
It's about 6 millikelvin.
Okay.
It's really small.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Ajit, I have a short question.
Yeah.
If I understand, your partons are fermions.
Yes.
Are there constructions involving anionic partons? Does it
Not to
help?
my knowledge.
Okay.
I mean, anyways, you will have to put some of them together to finally construct a state of electrons at the end of the day, but you can indeed use bosons or fermions and even anions in principle. But again, the problem is I don't think we know how to write down non-interacting states of anions, if at all that means anything. We don't have a simple slated determinant way of writing that down. Because here we can write down simply some slated determinant.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a short question. Why do you call Parton actually this?
Yeah, so that's the terminology that comes from high energy physics, but actually it's very misleading. So let me explain why that is the case. So the parton is just the fact that this is some part of the electron, but this is very different from the high energy partons like these quarks, etc. Because what happens is that all of the electrons actually get together to make the parton. So that's kind of what I tried to indicate using this notation. So here, all of the Zi's, so all of the electrons get together to form a single parton's wave function. So if you look at the Laughlin state, I had all the Zi minus Zj's to the power 3. So all the electronic coordinates get together to form the wave function of the parton. I mean, the parton terminology is just because it's some part of the electron. So I split the electron into some parts.
Okay, yeah, because I don't see much connections with the partons, that are used.
Yeah, and the other connection is that these carry fractional charge, just like the partons do in high energy.
Okay, it could be quarks also.
Yeah, so you could call them quarks.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So are there any other questions? If not, let us thank the speaker.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ajit.